Welcome to another exciting edition of Hardfire TV. My name is Cameron Weber. Thank you for watching. Today we're going to discuss how the U.S. president has been given too much power by the Congress and how this has led to endless national emergencies in the USA. This will be our August 2025 program. The current president has declared 8 national emergencies so far this his second administration. The first 250 years of the American project has failed because the necessary checks and balances between the branches of government has failed. The U.S. president has too much power. I'd like to welcome back Mark Axinn to
Thank you,
Hardfire
Ken.
TV.
Cameron, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome to help us discuss this conundrum that we're in. And I'm going to show up. Yeah, it's good to have you back. I'm going to put something up for our guests and for people watching the program. This is Mark and I did a program 15 years ago on central banking, talking about how it's going to lead to booms and busts. And how about easy money leads to booms and busts?
And it still does.
And it still does.
It still does.
So I'm just going to put a little reference. What's interesting about it is that you could buy the CD on Amazon, but now you can stream it through Amazon. So we're not getting any of those royalties, Mark.
No, we're not. But then Tom Lehrer, who recently passed away, said that he didn't want royalties anyhow. People could just copy his songs and perform them and not send him money.
Exactly.
So, some people are surviving just on knowing that their good product is out there.
Yeah,
that would be his good music and our shows on central banking and
they are out there. Yeah, that's the moral rights, as long as our creativity is acknowledged by people. And yeah, okay.
And that we should get. We do want recognition, but after that, people can watch it and they don't have to send us any money.
No, you don't have to send us money. And Hardfire, so we've known each other more than the 15 years.
Oh, for sure. That was a
couple years.
That was a couple of them that we did back when Gary Popkin was our producer.
But you were president of the Manhattan Libertarian Party.
Actually, I was treasurer there, but I was chair of the state party.
Chair of the state party.
From 2010 to 2015, I was chair of the Libertarian Party of New York. But back then, we had some more candidates. We had a little ballot access.
You're Manhattan. Marx and Jim Levinsky's and Ron Moore. And who am I forgetting? These 3 people were stalwarts of libertarian activism.
I know who you're forgetting, who has unfortunately passed away, but a great host in the past for
Joseph Dobrian.
For Hardfire, Joe Dobrian. Joseph Dobrian was also one of the integral members of the Manhattan Party.
And there are
many
ran for mayor.
Right, and there are many great Hardfires that he did. So if people want to watch really good shows and a gentleman who's dressed to the nines, see Joseph Dobrian's shows that he did mostly in the late aughts, right? 2008, 9, 10, and maybe the early teens as well.
He got tired of going broke in Manhattan and moved back home.
He moved to Iowa City. And unfortunately, he passed last year, but he's got a book out too. So he's a good guy. So are there any emergencies that we should talk about?
Well, right. There's many. The current president in the last, how long has it been? 6 months in office?
Something like that.
He's declared 8 new national emergencies since being in office.
Besides his election?
That was a national. Okay, be nice. We notice how we haven't said any politicians' names except for Joseph Dobrian's. So we're clean here. We don't mention anybody's names.
Well, presidents like to declare emergencies. Listen, sometimes emergencies happen. Pearl Harbor was attacked. Things happen and they are truly emergencies, and we can discuss the appropriate response or the inappropriate response as it may be.
Mark, you don't think Pearl Harbor was set up?
Well, I've heard multiple stories on it. I'm not an expert on World War II.
What does your favorite historian say about that?
Well, a lot of them will say things like, if there weren't Pearl Harbor, then the United States wouldn't have had an excuse to come into the war.
Exactly.
And,
just like Tonkin Bay, just like Cuba Bay, just like Manila Bay, keep blowing up our own ships. That's how we got into the Texas war.
So I think probably one of the first national emergencies, which was an emergency, but I think the response was over the top, would have been the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln inherited a country that was already split. And when Lincoln took over, immediately South Carolina, I think being the first, started to succeed from the Union.
Do they have a right to secede?
Well, frankly, personally, I think anybody has the right to make a contract and then to succeed, walk with their feet if they're not working out. But in that case, the North needed the products that were grown in the South. You had cheap cotton being grown in the South. And in fact, particularly disingenuous was Lincoln freed the slaves in the South, but not in the North. So I mean,
and rice too was grown in the
South. Right. So many products. So it was in the interest of the far wealthier, far more advanced, industrialized North to keep
establishment power
and
through today. We're the central bank. I mean, we can see the central bank from here.
Well, personally, I think that slavery would have collapsed anyhow. It's a failed institution. But before it would have collapsed, Lincoln immediately reacted, and his reactions were over the top. He suspended habeas corpus.
Exactly.
600,000 people died in a war where
brother against brother.
Yeah, brother against brother. He was actually blockading legislatures from getting into their capital cities in order to vote to succeed. So I mean, Lincoln had an emergency, but his reaction was over the top. But we have right now, and since then, we've had, and of course, the reaction to any emergency is always the growth of government. Government always becomes larger, and
that's Robert Higgs. Higgs Ratchet.
Yeah, Higgs. It is that institutional. I'm trying to think of his organization. I can't remember.
He was at the Ludwig von Mises Institute.
Yeah,
but he also the Independent. He was the founder and editor of the Independent Review.
So Higgs Independent Review. So Higgs has a very important premise that is basically that government will always seize more power and grow. And once it sees that power, of course, it never gives it up.
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right. So Higgs philosophy theory, which is absolutely true, is that government would always grow exponentially from emergencies. But what's particularly an issue today is that if we don't have an emergency, the president creates an emergency. And our current regime administration likes to
regime is the legitimate word.
Our current administration likes to create lots of emergencies.
I have another attorney friend, and when I told him about Higgs regime uncertainty, he said, I've never heard it called a regime before. And now after all of the COVID stuff, now that it's a regime doesn't surprise him at all.
Yeah. Well, of course, so the idea of the imperial president.
Exactly. The imperial president
is always a problem, but it really ratcheted up during Bush 2 after 9/11 and through today. I mean, Obama is much. I mean, I do not think that Obama and Biden didn't do this. Patriot Act is George Bush Jr.
That was a big ratchet. And what the current administration, what's the only thing they've done to unratchet it? We no longer have to take off our shoes.
Yeah, big deal. Big deal. And by the way,
that's a great example.
When the Department of Homeland Security was created and all of that during Bush 2, it's not like that apparatus wasn't there already from Clinton. So I don't want to blame Republicans and not say that the Democrats aren't as complicit in this because that was already there.
Except you used his name. But you said Bush too. You didn't really actually give him the honor of
George W.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about any current problems. We're just talking about those in the past right now.
Yeah. Right. So you mentioned the War Powers Act. So you're just a couple years older than I am. I'm from a small town in Mexico. You're from Manhattan. So you might have remembered when Schlesinger's The Imperial Presidency came out.
Sure, Arthur M. Schlesinger.
Yeah.
Great writer. He
after my time, right?
Yeah, he was a great writer. No, I remember reading stuff of his on I think he wrote stuff also about did he write about Andrew Jackson? It may have been Hofstadter too.
Hofstadter was another good story.
Yeah, a lot of great historians, really from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So they were professors at Harvard and Columbia, where I went to Columbia, but they were professors at a lot of those schools.
So the Imperial Presidency is what we're talking about.
Yeah, but they also ended up entwined in these presidencies. I mean, Brzezinski was teaching at Columbia, and then Carter grabbed him for Secretary of Defense. So
economic sociology says that the intellectual class or the historians that we're talking about, they're dominated by the leadership. So they're just court jesters and certain.
Yeah, okay. So, but the best example of those leadership would have been the best and the brightest during the Kennedy administration. Right. So these were guys who mostly came out of Harvard, because Kennedy, of course, was Massachusetts, and they came out of Harvard. But the problem is that whether it was Rusk or McNamara or any of them, I mean, they got us entrenched in the Vietnam War. I mean, what were we doing there? Were we stopping the dominoes from falling?
Right.
Were we being the policemen of the world?
You read my mind there. You read my mind there. So, right. It happened in 1973. Schlesinger writes the Imperial President book. And then also the War Powers Act is declared in 1973 also, which the Congress finally said, okay, President, you've had troops in Vietnam, how long? Since the French, 25 years? You haven't declared war like you should. The Constitution says you need to declare war if you're going to have troops overseas and lose troops overseas.
What value is the Constitution when you can just shoot from the hip?
So they
do what you want.
So they
and if the Constitution gets in your way,
right? So the War Powers Act was supposed to. The president was supposed to notify Congress that he's sending troops and get approval from Congress every, I think, 2 weeks to continue to have the troops there. And so now it's just a consulting thing. You have to let Congress know within 2 days that you've already put troops there.
But of course, they're already there. And in this world today, we can go and attack bunkers in Iran and do it in a matter of hours and blow a hole 200 feet deep.
Yeah.
And
that's been going on for 25 years.
Yeah. So, but it's particularly the interesting thing about the War Powers Act is it was passed in 73. The president then was a guy by the name of Richard Nixon, dropping a few good names, who ran as the peace candidate in 68. In 68, running against Humphrey, he ran as the peace candidate because he knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, these guys are so disingenuous. But the main problem is that even if we don't have an emergency, they seem to find one. So we have an emergency on our borders because people are coming in who want to work. And
Mark and I did a show about that also on Hardfire. One of the last ones we did was we talked with I guess we call it right-wing libertarian who wanted certain religious groups excluded from immigration. And I remember I was teaching at the time, and I would show that also to my students because that's a perennial issue, right? You said President Obama tear down the border. I remember when people were saying he was too tough on immigration, and then I showed it to my student, and one of the students said, "Oh man, that must be difficult to have such a right winger as a libertarian."
Yeah. Well, Obama was the deporter in chief, but our current president wants to outdo that. I don't think that's much of an accomplishment. There's a piece actually in the New York Times today, and it's very similar to the story I told a dozen years ago about Postville, Iowa, where they had
You're
a
still
chicken
reading the
factory.
Post. You're still reading the New York Times. Oh my God.
I look
Once
at the
a New
headlines.
Yorker, all of New York.
Always. So I read
Post.
the New Yorker too. So and I'm
Oh
the
my God,
Post.
you
So
really
yeah.
are. You really
So
are.
but in the Times today there was a piece about a factory in Nebraska, and it's just a different factory, and it said to the people from Guatemala, they're from Mexico. But the bottom line is that you've got a lot of immigrant families that their paperwork may not have been 100% kosher, but
government paperwork is difficult to do even when it is on.
Exactly. I mean, the reality is that if they want to stop you, if they want to find some violation, you know they will, because there's so many.
Mark, where I live here in Sunset Park, many Chinese immigrants, many Mexican, Central American, Mexican immigrants. There's anti-ICE signs going up. It's a peaceful neighborhood.
Used to have Finns here in this neighborhood. It used to be the Finnish capital.
So I can understand theoretically why you should have a strict rule of law for legal purposes for the United States, right? I mean, paying the IRS is serious business. You know what I mean?
Well, these people were paying.
Exactly.
They're working. They're paying taxes.
But
they're buying gas. They're buying food.
ICE invasions is the worst violations for ICE.
Yeah, and actually, unfortunately, the mood in most of the country right now is that the president is protecting our jobs. He's keeping our borders safe.
But
from people who want to work here and doing jobs that actually most Americans don't want. These are not nice jobs. The current one that's being discussed in Nebraska is a meat factory, and the other one that happened in Iowa was a factory where they're cleaning chickens. I mean, these are not jobs that are.
Mark, you bring up a good point. The imperial presidency was about about the War Powers Act. Congress trying to get some of the power for proclaiming war back from the president. But what we're talking about now, including the national emergency of the border, is part of the National Emergencies Act of 1976. So that's what gives you the right to put troops on the border is the National Emergencies Act.
Okay, so let me talk about troops on the border.
So that's 50 years.
There are a lot of countries that are surrounded by other countries that will invade them and actually send armies against them. And Israel is obviously a perfect example. And Israel was attacked in 1967 by Egypt, Syria, and Jordan simultaneously. So other countries were sending their armies. That's not what's happening in the United States. We are actually not being attacked by the Mexican army right now.
Or the Canadian.
Or the Canadian one. The Canadians.
Do they have
I don't know. They've got the Royal Mounted Canadian Police.
Costa Rica doesn't even have an army.
So we're not being attacked by some army that we need to put our troops up there. What's happening is people are coming here trying to get jobs, trying to get a better life. And to invoke a War Powers Act or any other act saying that we are
national emergency.
Right. That's not an emergency. Now, do we want to control the border to stop,
exactly. It's word games, Mark.
Fidel Castro from emptying the Cuban jails like he was doing at one point?
So your point right. So it's not an emergency.
No, but they'll create an emergency.
By declaring it an emergency, they create an emergency.
Because you know what? The current president likes to do whatever he wants to do that day. And then somebody in his administration reminds him he doesn't really have the power to do that. But then he's got some smart lawyers thinking up, well, you know what? Let's hang our hat on this hook over here. Let's say that it was this emergency act gives us authority to do this. Let's declare this an emergency. Well, what's an emergency?
He's declared 8 emergencies in 6 months.
All right. So what's a real emergency? How about like when Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico? That would be an emergency. That's a natural emergency that warrants our attention and help to rebuild Puerto Rico, which has been rebuilt mostly, but unfortunately not as well as it should be.
And it's getting out of bankruptcy, right? Growing itself.
Some places, Portugal has as well, and even Greece, which was
Ireland.
So a lot of places will, if you allow the market to help them. But maybe that to me is an emergency. the recent flooding in Texas. That to me is an emergency that warrants both our deep
worthy of the name,
deep humiliation at what happened and our sorrow for the families that were affected. And also, that's an emergency that warrants the government to interact. Is it an emergency that people want to come into this country and work at jobs that because that Americans don't want? Of course not. That's not an emergency. And how many other emergencies have been declared over time?
Well, Mark, 90 emergencies.
90 emergencies.
There's been 90 emergencies declared, and 40 of them are still going.
Doesn't that undermine like the true emergency?
That's
the value of what
you remember Derek Sackerdell, right? He's done a few Hardfires too.
Yeah, sure.
He came out. He's a handyman now. He came over and helped Xiaoxi and fix our kitchen a little bit. And he said, and I told him about this show and that we were going to do it together. But you just need some time to do some research. Glad you could make it back. And he said, "Oh yeah, so many emergencies. I'm scared to death. How about you?"
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Derek's point is well taken, because the thing is that everything's an emergency. And quite frankly, the government is real good at ginning up fear. And they love to do that. I mean, so what do we end up having? What was Franklin's quote about those who will give
fear
up?
Fear is a man's best friend.
Well, that's a different thing, but that's not the one I was thinking of. Ben Franklin said something about he who will give up his freedom for security deserves neither.
Exactly.
Right. And even if we don't talk about what people deserve, you're going to get neither. You're actually not going to get much if you keep giving up all your freedom.
If everything is an emergency, nothing is an emergency. I guess that's our point. Believe it or not, our director says we've already spoken for 20 minutes. So we only have 5 minutes left.
And we're still on page 2 of his outline. Maybe page 3.
Yeah, Mark's very good. He's cutting up tomorrow's papers. So anyway, the current president might go down in history as Tariff Man. All right.
So there's another issue.
Where trade deficits are deemed as an emergency, which is a counter to every economic thinking since Adam Smith and even before.
And it's also counterproductive. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to raise the price on products that Americans want.
We're talking about tariff, man.
Yeah. So let's say like an American wants to buy one of these cell phone things, right? Well, guess what? Where are the chips manufactured? If they're made
all over the world.
Yeah, but probably
not. The stand comes from here.
Yeah, right. So if the chips are manufactured all over the world, you have to increase the price. I mean, the reality is that if you make a product more expensive, and it doesn't have to be a big company like Apple, it could be a tiny company, but if you make a product more expensive, they have to raise the price.
Well, Mark, what that does is that creates monopolies and oligopolies, which are easier to control. So the little guy is priced out to increase trade barriers on the products inputs to production. So you get this kind of corporatism, easy to control, big business, big labor, big government kind of scenario.
But again, that's an employee. That's also an employer way to look at it too. I look at it more from the consumer point of view. I mean, all this emphasis on protecting the American jobs and the American. The reality is, we are not going to make T-shirts as cheaply and readily and easily as they can in Bangladesh. But American consumers want to buy these T-shirts that say, New York Yankees on them, or whatever they say, or Econ 101 for Cameron, right?
Yeah.
And whatever.
I never got beyond that.
Yeah. So whatever the T-shirts,
because there's nothing really is beyond that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mathematical game.
But so we're increasing products to Americans, so Americans have to pay more money for them. Okay. I mean, the tariffs are counterproductive. So it's not an emergency.
That's done on
meddling into the marketplace. It's wrong on every level.
Yeah, that's under the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, the Trade Expansion Act, which was the height of that, which you're talking Eastern establishment, when everyone in the Kennedy administration is a Keynesian economist. And that's where the stupid thinking that trade barriers are bad under the Trade Expansion Act, which I guess we can agree should go away.
Well, most of these acts, I mean, what happens is the government wants to do something, so they pass some law. Well, you can have a million laws.
Well, there's a joke
about it. Yeah.
So there ought to be a law about that.
Yeah, a law not to pass any more laws. There's a law I would support.
Excellent. So right, Keynesian economics. So Trump is just, excuse me, the current administration is just following along in this outmoded thinking of Keynesian economics, which is still part of law.
And even worse,
as is the Senate.
New York City is likely to elect an avowed socialist.
That's
right. How well is government control of the supermarkets working in Caracas these days?
Just as well as it did in Moscow and Kyrgyzstan.
Exactly. So
which is not at all.
Right. It's ridiculous. So
everything's driven underground.
The more control that the government has, and they just create emergencies in order to get more control, the worse life is going to be for the average American.
Exactly. So that's the current administration, and we talked about how these tariffs, are they on, are they off, what's the amount going to be? That leads to regime uncertainty, which Robert Higgs says the reason that emergencies, the government grows during is regime uncertainty prevents the growth of the private sector. So when you have the government doing emergencies, changing the rule of law, it prevents the growth of the private sector. And I want to mention one other thing, speaking of emergencies. So the US government is $37 trillion in debt, which is 100,000 per person. Unfunded liabilities are twice that. So there's each person in the United States, 330 million people, it owes the federal government $300,000. And the Libertarian Party wants to say, now that's a national emergency.
That is an emergency, but it's never even being talked about anymore.
You and I talked about it 15 years ago.
I remember.
We started.
So hopefully everyone will get on to streaming Hardfire even more now that they've seen the two of us reminisce about some of the past shows.
Right. So yes, thank you. So this will be, Gary Popkin produced maybe 150 shows before I came on. And I've produced maybe 75 shows.
Fantastic.
Right.
2 good producers, an excellent show, available on BCAT.
Yes. So we have
on Amazon now.
And Amazon and YouTube. Yes, streaming
YouTube,
through Amazon. We have just 1 minute left in today's program about the imperial presidency, how we got here and what to do about it. Thank you, Mark, for joining us today and sharing your insights.
Sam, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to be on Hardfire.
Great to discuss this. Thank you too to our viewers. Thank you for watching Hardfire TV. Each of our episodes appears 6 times monthly on the Brooklyn Free Speech Network, citywide, every borough, not just Brooklyn, and streaming through the BRIC Arts Media House YouTube channel. Just search for Hardfire TV and Brooklyn Free Speech. See you next time.
Thank you.